Hello everyone, my name is Michael King. I'm a plein air and studio painter. We're going to be painting snow today. You can find me on Instagram at michaelking.ca, Patreon at Michael King Art, YouTube Michael King Art, and my website is also michaelking.ca. These are a few scenes that I painted in snow. The large one is Belcara. The one to the right is a reference photo from a friend. I can't remember who. The bottom one is also a reference photo, the bottom left. The bottom middle is near my home, and we had a snow day a couple years ago, I guess. And the bottom right is in Pitt Meadows. That was probably one of my first snow scenes that I ever did. And from these two paintings, I just want to talk about the snow in terms of color. And that snow isn't always white, nor is it always blue. You can see in the top swatches there that reference to the painting on a close-up of the painting on the left. We have the blue, we have some greens, we have some violets, and we have some yellow whites. And same thing in the bottom. The references from right to left is a little bit of a CNN white. Next one's kind of a greeny white. Next one's a blue white, and next one's a yellow white. So to really get an impact of snow, to get really great interest, there is a variety of color. For some fun, I YouTubed painting snow videos, and the first three that I watched were all about white and blue-white for the shadows. And I was looking at the snows, and I'm like, oh my god, they're so static, so boring. And so I really want to emphasize how much vibrancy is in snow. And I don't really think of it as color shifting. I think it is temperature shifting. So you have some warm areas, you have some cool areas. The blue area is cooler than the green area. The green area is cooler than the CN area. Then the yellow area is a little warmer than the rest of the area. And so really that's what it's all about. And it's getting your mind around that. And in general, like if you squint at the top four swatches, the first three from left to right blend together. So that tells you they're the same value. So just because the temperature / color is changing, the value is not. And that's an important aspect. Now, this is a situation where this is a reference photo. I got this off Pixabay or Pexels.com. It's they're sites that offer photographs without any royalty images. Can't use them for competitions or stuff like that, but they're great for painting. And the one on the left is the one I got off the site. It's kind of saturated in itself, but if you cover up the image on the right, you can see some reds and blues and greens in there. Now the one on the right, what I did is I brought it into a Photoshop application called Affinity Photo, which is, I think it runs around $60, so it's very economical compared to Photoshop, and it's an amazing program. So what I did is I increased the intensity of these colors, and you can see the pinks, the greens, the blues really come out, but at least you can see them from the photo. And the best thing to do would be go out, of course, and paint it on site. But I don't know if we all have the gear to bundle up during these cold days. But at least it allows you to see the color now within the snow. And same with this. If you look at the images on the right and then you look at the larger image on the left, you can see it almost turns black and white. So cover up the two smaller ones on the right and look at that scene. Pretty much, I'd say 98% of people would just paint it with grays, maybe a little bit of blue in there. But if you were to see this image just on your screen itself, you'd be able to differentiate some greens and some blues in there and some violets. And so what I did is the next step, increase the intensity or the vibrancy of the colors. And you can start to see the greens and the yellows and the violets pop out of the snow. And then I added it again. I multiplied that effect. And now you can see them without a doubt. There's like 3 bands of yellow, green, violet, and blue. And it really helps give you kind of a map to go for when painting the snow, so you can see that there is color bands in there. And of course, this isn't paint from, it's just to know where it might be. But I do find it interesting that if you look at the right one long enough, you look at the left one, it's totally black or white. You can't see any color in there at all. And this will be the scene we are painting today. So this is the scene I got off Pixabay or Pexels. It's not a local scene at all, but I found it interesting because we have some great shadows and some great light coming through, and the nice dark trees, as well as the golden ochres in the background there. And in the bottom right, I increased the intensity of the color, and you can really see those blues pop. And you can also see some violets appear in the foreground and whatnot. And so this is kind of a guiding thing. Now within the deep blue that you see there in the shadows, they won't be that blue, anymore on the violet side, but there will be variations of green and everything. We'll go to the final overlay here. And so this is the scene, but in a square format. And I like the square format, so I interpolated this landscape image into a square format. And last Thursday, what I did is I live streamed called Bettering Your Composition, where I actually took this landscape image and I transferred it onto this square. And I talked about the different placement of the different trees and why I made that decision. So after this video, or after this live stream, if you want to go check that out on my YouTube page, you'll be able to find this video, and it's about 30 minutes long, and I talk about the entire process of how I transcribed this onto the square format for the best composition that I thought possible. Some of this stuff, I don't think it makes sense, even though nature provided it. And I'm a plein air painter, and I do this all the time. So the lesson learned here is just because the photo or nature tells you where something is, doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just establish the darks of the trees. Now, in the photo, you can see they're pretty much all dark, and that's the nature of photography. The trees are relatively close together, so you're not really going to get much depth of field, but we do want to differentiate some depth in here. So this tree will be a little bit darker than these trees. This tree will be the darkest. There's not much difference in the foreground aspect, maybe 10, 12 feet, if that. But this one will have a different value than this one here. The end goal here, I made a decision, always make a decision on your focal point before you paint, otherwise you're just wasting your time, is I'm going to try this area here as a focal point. I'm going to have some nice contrasting bright snow here against this dark. Everything is designed to lead you into that area. Now, saying that, I made this decision, but hey, you know what? As I get through the painting, another opportunity might present itself, and it might slightly shift here and there. It's important to make that distinction, that don't keep your mind set in stone how something has to be if something else presents itself. So we shall start with this one. And this mixture is just what I have: burnt sienna, a little bit of viridian green, and we'll just make a tree-like. The beauty of trees is you don't have to be precise at all. And as we progress back, maybe I'll add a tiny bit of white, maybe a little more green or a little bit more blue. We shall see. Yeah, so I don't know if that's coming across a little bit through the video. To me, this one's a lot lighter and a lot cooler than the foreground one. And so we'll just work with that. All these will change. I'll paint over top of them here and there. Maybe this back one here is a little more green, a little more viridian, a little cooler. Keep those temperatures shifting, make things interesting. There's this one here. Change the shape a little bit. The dog's down like that. I'll worry about all the tiny branches later. I just want to mass in all my trees. So unfortunately, we have a little bit of work to do before we get to the snow. There we go. These are a little bit farther in the distance, so what I did is I add a little more white. It's interesting that it might be hard to see on the video, but there we go. And I actually have a little tree here, and actually here as well. I have a little stubby of a tree. And the idea between that is when you come to this smaller one, it's going to stop you coming off that edge. That's my intention. And I put this smaller one here so there isn't such a big gap. But all that's going to be filled in with the back foliage anyways. We'll see how that presents itself when I get to it. I use vine charcoal. No, not at all, not at all. What I love about the vine charcoal is if I ever make a mistake, it comes off cleanly. There's no staining. What you can do as well, after you get it all on here, you can just blow off the dust. When you paint, it just melts into the paint. And it allows me to not worry about edges as well. So when I paint, I don't care about where my outlines are. I feel if I was in pencil, it would be more concrete. I'd be start painting in the lines. I love that soft vine charcoal. There we go, a little cooler. So this is just ochre and a little bit ultra blue. Just scrub it in. I'm using a bristle brush because I love the marks it makes. Don't worry about the edges. You can fix them later. I try to keep the edges as soft as possible at the very beginning. You keep them too hard at the beginning, you feel like your mentality is, oh, I got to stay with it. I got to keep them sharp. And that isn't really the idea of a painting, is it now? Not everything sharp. Hyperrealism artists, they keep everything sharp generally. Unless they paint from a photo that's been blurred. There's no reason. We don't see that way, right? If you look at your, I don't know where you guys are in a room or anything like that, but if you look at a painting on a wall or that you're across the room from you, it's in focus, but everything in your peripheral vision is soft. And that's pretty much the idea here. Keep everything soft initially until you want to focus in. Maybe I'll make it a little bit warmer as we come centrally. So the idea is, it's a little bit cooler over here. It's warmer in the center where I'm going to guide you toward my focal point. Generally with skies, people usually put them in too dark. Sky is your light bulb. Occasionally they are dark. They can be dark and gloomy, but generally they're your light bulb. So put them in lighter. You can always darken them up later. Vertical and arbitrary strokes seem to work best as well for skies, I find. Or is there horizontal? I mean, they have their horizontal brushstrokes have their advantages, but I find that makes the sky kind of dead in energy. And I'm going to change this background. You can see where in the photograph we have all these trees kind of centrally here. I'm changing it so they're larger on the left hand side, so they guide you in. Oh, look at that! Forgot a tree. Let's get that in there before I forget. Kind of comes across that way. And everything that was designed within this composition, so there's a variety of shapes, variety of spaces. I go really in depth on that in that YouTube live stream that you can watch. Just a cerulean blue hue and white. The reason I use cerulean blue hue is it is basically just a pre-mixed white and phthalo blue. I don't use phthalo blue on my palette. I find it too much. So I just use this pre-mixture for cerulean. The reason I use the cerulean blue hue is cerulean blue itself is really expensive. Cobalt blue is really expensive. So the hue is an economical choice. It's very light fast, and it keeps its saturation, its chroma, a lot more than the cerulean blue actual pigment. All right, now we have the sky in one value, but skies aren't like that. We have to decide, well, the sky kind of decides which way it's lightest and which way it's coolest. You can kind of see it's really bright on this side. What I'm going to do, I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm going to create it lighter in the center and a little bit to the right. That way, again, the contrast can help us bring us in and then hopefully down when we get the snow in there. And especially in the lower areas, make it lighter. And as you come down further, of course, we're going to have a little more warmth in it. So we'll lighten it and then we'll warm it as we come down. So that's a temperature shift. I just add yellow. And yes, blue and yellow make green, but perceptually, when it's in the sky, it doesn't matter. We could lighten it later a little more, but we'll see. I'll move on. Right. So let's just get the river in. Now, this is a photograph, so the river seems really, really dark. More dark than it is. We could paint it that way. Nice, warm, dark. So we're going to start off really dark, and then we can always add on top of it. Kind of that, they have that general guideline, dark to light. Now you don't always have to paint like that. It's just a guideline. I kind of like painting light to dark, but. And then there'll be areas where there is some sky. We have to choose that. Just kind of wipe that off for now. Just more of a reminder to myself where there might be some sky. We can hopefully use that to guide ourselves in a little bit more. All right, now the fun part, we'll get into the shadows of the snow. So I have 4 mixtures here, and they're pretty much all the same value. If I put them side by side and you squinted, they would all blend together. The edges would blend together. You'd see a noticeable temperature shift, but the edges would all blend together, so you know that they're the correct value, or all the same value anyway. Having said that, though, we'll see. We'll use this to start with. And we have to go over my entire sketch of all this beautiful stuff that I have there. Now, this is a photo, so the snow will be darker in the photo than it really is. Keep that in mind. Put the snow there. Some of this brush should have come forward, so I'll correct that in a minute. I'll just put the snow in where I think it needs to be for now. There's the snow just in here a little bit. Comes up this tree. As we come across the shadows of the trees, chances are I will darken it just to get that a little bit of more contrast in there. And so there's a painter from Maine called Stapleton Kearns. He has an amazing blog that he writes online. You can find it. But he talks about holistic whites. The idea is, a little bit of blue in this white, a little bit of violet in this white, a little bit of iridium in this white, and a little bit of yellow in this white. And so every white is white, but it's a different white. And that's how you paint snow. I should have one with some magenta in it as well, or red, but we'll see. So we'll just get all this in. Scribbity, scribbity. I just use that cerulean blue hue again. For the shadows, I'll probably make it a little more ultramarine when I get into this area, just to keep the variety of blues different. So let's have a look here. I mean, this starts getting a little bit lighter, but what I'll do is I will put this in as it is right now, just so I have a base layer. I mean, the bottom right is lit up quite a bit. We can always paint over top of this base. This is a log here. See how nicely that wipes off? A little variety of brush strokes, right? Keep them random, keep them dynamic, keep them interesting. A lot of my lines, sometimes they even show through the paint, which I think is an amazing thing. I used to worry about always getting rid of my construction lines on a painting, and then I was at a show. I went to a museum in Seattle, I think it was, and they had all these old masters, and this one has a beautiful schooner ship on an ocean and all this other stuff. Just amazing. It was one of those, a lot of glazes kind of thing for the old masters. But I walked up close to it. Oddly enough, you could pretty much see all his entire drawing underneath the painting. I thought, oh damn, now that's fascinating. If they can get away with it, so can I. We have a little bit of light snow up here. And now we'll take this blue mixture. Well, we don't necessarily need to use that specific blue. We'll add a little ultramarine, a little white. So what I'm trying to do is trying to get a value shift, but there will be also a temperature shift. So do little by little, a lighter value. So we'll do a test. Yeah, I kind of like that. Scrape that off. This is a big glob. That's a nice contrast. Still has a little bit of chrome in it. Still using my bristle brush. I generally use a bristle brush to block everything in. It provides great texture, great lines. I'll do a quick little zoom in. You can see the texture that's already there, right? That texture is amazing with bristle brushes. And then later on, I'll go in with my synthetics because it's easier to paint with synthetic brushes over oil paint. All right, so we got to get these shapes. And what I love about these shadows, they actually dictate the shape of this land, which is quite amazing because we got to go up and then it comes back around and then it comes more here. So we got a nice little jagged aspect of it. And we'll get these in and then we'll see what they look like. And it's all about really looking for the shapes. If you paint and you think of shapes, it makes things so much easier. Considerably easier. Kind of blend together down here. And we have kind of some shapes down here as well. No, I don't think in terms of color schemes. It's rarely that I ever do. And I'll tell you why. It's kind of arrogant. But color schemes work. Don't get me wrong. But what I learned over time is the idea of color schemes being that so complementary colors work in a painting. Yes, without a doubt. Split triads, and analogous. There is a color explanation for anything and everything you paint. Okay. And that's the guidelines, and that's how you teach people. Okay, this is more analogous. This is more complementary. This is more split complementary. This is a square, quad, something other. Basically, what I learned is any and all colors go together no matter what. So it doesn't matter. It really, in a sense. I mean, it's great to have complementary stuff because they pop against each other. I do think in terms of color schemes. So if there's some blue in here. Maybe we can get some orange. Maybe I can throw some more oranges in the trees, or you have the oranges here that pop out already. If there's some violet, maybe I'll look for some yellow and pop it in, but I don't really paint to a color scheme, as I guess you would call it. The more it's odd. The more you paint, the more you know, and then the more you realize all the stuff you learned before isn't really. All right, where are we here? Oh yeah, I want to bring in some of the goldens down below here. Kind of bring this up. I have some of this back here. Got some snow in the background here. Always look in the background. We're going to cover this up anyway, but it's nice to have. It's always easier to put the big strokes behind objects first, and then when you come in later to do all the wispy stuff, everything's already there. Kind of back to front. So what we have is we have these next wispy trees in there. And what I'm going to do, these wispy trees are so wispy, I got to go back to my sky mix that I have. I shouldn't have cut it out the way I did. Trying to remix that value. A little bit too green. Have to start from scratch, I think. There we go. So I'll bring this down. So that's always a good lesson as well. You know, this mixture here, I originally mixed to redo the sky area. It ended up being too, oops, keep on going into it, too green. And instead of wasting my time trying to bring that back into what I want, I just started a new mix. Right? I save paint that way. I save time that way. So now this wispy stuff that we have, those wispy trees. Now I don't use a medium. I'm an oil painter and I don't use a medium. The only thing I use is a little bit of Gamsol to help thin my paint. Let's see here. That's a little bit too dark. So the thing with wispy trees is they're a lot lighter than you think they are because they're backlit by the sky and they're being surrounded by light. You might adjust this later. But and you have to remember as well, these wispy trees are there for context only, right? They are in the background, unrelated to everything else, but they dictate a forest in this area. Can I come up like that? Oh yeah, for sure. And it all stems from the fact that colors don't matter. Now that's a strong statement. Or I should say color matching is not important. It's indifferent. Just because something is a certain color in a photo, first of all, it's a wrong color because the photo is going to manipulate it. It's not going to be exactly you see in life. Second of all, that color, even if you see it in life, if it's outside, let's say it's a big red ball on your lawn, right, on a cloudy day, it's going to be a different red than when it's a sunny day. It's a different red. It's a different red in the shadows. It's a different red when you bring when you put a blue umbrella over it. The color is really irrelevant. It's just the hue is red. Right now, when I say color, I'm talking about not only just the hue, but the value and the temperature, and the chroma. And so to match all that, just for the sake that it's in your photograph, that color, oh my God, to me, that's a huge waste of time. All I know is that that ball is red and I'm going to paint it that red, whatever red I choose in the value and the temperature I have available to me in my pigments, right? So that means I don't have to go out and buy specific pigments for a specific painting. Now, caveat to that, there are certain situations, let's say you're painting a Caribbean Sea, right? That beautiful aqua green, blue color, and you're stuck with ultramarine blue and, say Hansa yellow on your palette. You'll never get that color. You can paint the painting with it, but it won't have that. If you're trying to get that vibrancy of that water, you'll never get it. So in that instance, experiment with what colors you could use to make that, and then use those colors appropriately. So sometimes you have to shift your palette to what you're painting, but in general, I would say you don't have to. Oh, absolutely. Once you learn that, oh my God, it changes everything. All right. So we kind of got that in there, and we'll go back with some of this blue mixture again. So especially when you're starting, if you're starting out, don't worry about it. Kind of red, make it kind of red. We have some gaps in this. So I'm just trying to put in some negative space here. No, not at all. Not at all. It all turns to the same anyway. I mean, that's the freedom of it. It's kind of a different color. It's a shift. Now, the success for paintings for me, I believe, is variety. And so just because you pick up a little bit of color, doesn't really matter. Now, there are caveats to that. Let's say you're painting a white dress and it's a red background. You pick up some of the red and there's a big streak of red in the white dress. Well, then you might have a problem. But landscapes are so freeing because everything kind of melts into everything else anyway, right? Good tip as well is always clean your palette throughout a painting. I know people make pools of paint. I have pools of paint here, but they're for a specific purpose. If you're mixing paints on your palette, it's always good to remove it and start afresh because the next mixtures you make are going to be a little bit different than what you just put on. And when you put them on your canvas, it's going to add a little more variety, which would be nice. So I just want to put a little bit of blue in the water. Now, the blue is going to be a little bit darker than the sky, of course. I did a demo on water reflections as well for Opus a few months ago. I'll make it live on YouTube as well after this demo, so you can watch it if you want. So these little bit of blue things are just to make it interesting and to also potentially... And you look for spaces between the trees. Like the spacing, the blue that you see here in this river is going to be a little bit different than the blue you'll see here, just because I've shifted everything. So I look for where everything is between the trees, instead of where they are on the canvas, or I mean on the photo. give a little bit of interest. Maybe there's a little bit here. And you can see how that mix that I have underneath is mixing with the blue as well. And it's bringing it down, but that's fine. It all helps set it back anyway. So in this area where we have a little bit of light coming through with the snow, we're gonna pump it up a little bit. We're gonna make it interesting. So we're gonna go into this yellow mixture I have here. This might be too dark. I'm gonna just put a test. Actually, that's pretty nice. Well, let's add a little bit of white to it. So this is just white and a little bit of Hansa yellow medium. And it's, if we put white down, right, so there's white. I mean, there's a stark difference between the white and the mix that I have. That's like, what, maybe a step? But it's very important because if you just start painting all white on this canvas, you can't get any whiter. So your whites will never be bright. They'll just be all mixing together. And white itself is a very cool color. White with a little bit of yellow on it is quite warm. Doesn't matter how much yellow's in it. Doesn't matter if it's cool yellow or warm yellow. That white is now warmer than white. And it actually will pop out more than just white on the canvas. Now this instance, I'm wiping my brush because that blue is kind of interfering with it. So between strokes, I will wipe my brush. And this kind of comes up like this. So you can see there's quite a bit of variety in this snow in terms of temperature shifting, or some people call color. But there. Once you start thinking in temperature, when you're color mixing, it changes everything. Because it's now a warm violet or a cool violet. It's not a bluey green violet. You find different ways to explain colors, and they don't make sense, whereas it's a lot easier to say, okay, it's a violet and it's warm. So what do? You warm it with a little bit of red. If you want to kill the chroma on the violet, you warm it with a little bit of yellow. And it makes color mixing so much easier. Once I really, really, really understood temperature, my color mixing changed. I didn't really care about what the color was. I just cared about the value and the temperature. It's warmer there. It's warmer back here. So now within this blue here, I'm going to make it a little more interesting. I'm going to take some of the Viridian mix. All right. And I think this Viridian is a little bit too light for this. Yes. So in the shadow area, in over here, this Viridian mix actually will be pretty nice. A little bit of variety. But for the shadow area, I am going to, mix in a little bit more to get the value shift. But I'm also using Viridian because I want the temperature shift. And I'm doing that for just variety. Viridian's cool, the blue's cool, right? But the blue is cooler than the Viridian. So it's just going to make it a little more interesting in there. You can kind of see it on your monitor. Yes, that is. Transparency factors, snow is snow, so it's not going to really affect the snow much. But for everything else, transparency can play a huge factor, especially when I'm doing water. If you want to see a bit of the white canvas coming through for variety. My darks generally are all transparent. My ultramarine blue, my transparent red oxide, even my permanent alizarin crimson is a bit of transparent. So when I mix my violets, it becomes a little more transparent. But that's only if the pigments aren't mixed with white. And I find it makes good washes and everything like that. But it doesn't really, it kind of works for the trees here because it helps change the values. But in this instance, the transparency area doesn't really make a big difference. So in here, I do want to make this a little bit darker as well. Just trying to follow these shapes here. It started off a little bit too light, I noticed, because it is in the image here to the top right. The values are darker, so I will adjust it, which I knew I had to do when I first put the snow on. And so it's a back and forth dance, right? Painting is nothing more than a series of corrections, right? If you think of painting just that way, you'll never be sad about your piece again because you know it always has to change. As soon as you believe your painting has to be finished, the second you put down a brushstroke, you're in for some deep disappointment. I've been in that deep disappointment before. It takes a while to realize that not everything you paint is going to work out. So it's all about choices. Value there change. And with this area here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the left side a little bit darker. And that's a choice. It is initially darker in the image, but what it'll help it do is it'll darken this edge. It'll help visually just bring you in. So always try to make a decision on what you're going to do. Darken this area a little bit. All right, and then depending on how dark we get, let's see if we can push it a little bit darker. There we go. All right, so already you can see that, this is darker, this is lighter, so you kind of come this way. Maybe we'll make a mix with some Viridian in it as well, because they're both very cool colors, ultramarine blue, or blues and greens in general. And I like Viridian because it's a nice cool green, but it can easily be warmed up. A bit of variety in here. And it's quite green around here. Not green, but Viridian-ish. Although I think in temperature, sometimes I talk in colors, just to make it more clear to people what's going on. And we have this here. here. And I'm just looking for shapes in the image itself. Oh yeah, this is 10 by 10, I believe. And it's on board. I like board over canvas, just because it stores flatter. All right, this is an instance where take some off. Right, don't be ever afraid to change something on your canvas. I just want to make the stream a little bigger. I really like how it is bigger in the image here. So I'll just make it a little bit larger in this area here. And then we can come back with this. Change it up again. I'm going to go back to the mid-ground brushes. Right, I got that value in there, but I want to go a little bit darker, especially in the midsection here. So everything doesn't have to be completed at once. You can move on. I get the right value, so I test. A little bit too warm for a shadow, so I'm going to cool it with some ultra. Heck, I could even use some violet. I pre-mix my violet. I pre-mix my black. That way I can control the temperature. Oh, the violet is ultramarine blue and permanent alizarin crimson. And always make sure if you buy alizarin crimson, it's permanent. And the black consists of transparent red oxide, same as burnt sienna, kind of. Except this is transparent, burnt sienna isn't. And ultramarine blue. And that way I get a nice black. So when you mix it with white, you get a nice gray. But depending now, if I wanted to make a warm gray, I can add more the transparent red oxide into it. And now I have a warm gray, whereas I could add an ultramarine blue to make it a cool gray. So, and that makes a good point. There's a painter out there called Mark D'Alessio. Amazing painter. You can find him on YouTube. But he has this ideology, or this little piece of information that I just loved. He says, what in doubt, if you can't figure out what a color is, mix a warm gray. So there's sometimes out in the field, I'm thinking, God, what is that? What is that? I get the value, but kind of what's going on there. And so now I mix a warm gray, and 9 times out of 10, it's right. So these darks that we have in the brush, we have to remember that we don't want to make them as dark as this foreground tree, because technically that tree is going to be the darkest. It's a vertical element. Vertical elements, especially with a sun between 10 and 3 or whatever, they're going to be the darkest things in your scene. And since we want to force aerial perspective a little bit, we also want to have these darks in the background a little bit later. So this is going to create sort of a variety of shapes here. And we'll worry about all the wispy bits of these branches a little bit later. You could start already back your brush. I do quite a bit of scraping and go over it again. We got some down here. We could probably force it a little darker on the edges, just again to keep us in the painting. So over here, maybe these darks are a little bit darker, just for the sake of keeping us there. And here, let's add a little bit of white. So as you hear me talk to myself, that's pretty much what I say to myself when I'm painting, right? A little more white, a little warmer, a little cooler, a little darker. Because value is the most important, without a doubt. And for me, value and then temperature. This kind of goes back there. Oddly enough, a little bit of violet back there. But you gotta get the right value, so I'm gonna mix in violet. The violet is a little bit warmer than the mixture that I had before. And it goes to show you, I'm putting a violet back here. Who thought these brushes would be violet? And that works back into the colors ideology of complementary. So now I am putting violets in a ochre area. So now it's going to punch out the ochre a little bit more, etc., etc. I'll make this a little bit lighter. Come up to the top tips. Come over here. So with water reflections, generally they will reflect a little bit later. In this case, it's a photograph, so everything looks black. But I'm going to make them kind of mimic what the trees are. So I put them in a little bit warmer. If I find that it gets too warm in here, I'm going to cool off the main darks. Because reflections in general are a little bit cooler. But that being said, just because they're cooler doesn't mean they can't have a warm in them, as long as that warm isn't warmer than the warmth in the scene. So even though this water right here is warm, it's not as warm as the white of the snow. So it is technically cool. In terms of colors, like the blue will be richer and deeper because the water is reflecting the zenith of the sky, the zenith being the top. And we all know that skies go from lighter to darker. So it's more of an ultramarine blue when it gets to the top. So that's more of what's reflecting in the water itself. Really, you could argue that reflections are a bit too light and also the wrong chroma. I guess I could make it a little bit deeper, and it helps bring out the color of it, I guess, as well, the saturation of it. That's kind of how I choose what I see in the water. Now, of course, if we had a big red beach ball here, all right, it would be reflecting. You'd see a little bit a lighter and cooler red beach ball in the water itself. All right, I actually see some. This mixture is moved to more of a viridian as well. So we are going to put that down. And so now these distant bushes are starting to come to life. I don't want to ruin my lights there, though. Where else do I see this? I see that a little bit in here as well. And kind of a stripe of it here for some reason. So if I do a quick zoom in, you can kind of see the difference in temperature shifting. In these darks, it has a warmer to cool, and then in these lights, a little bit more violet, and then there's that ochre on top, and so it really starts to make things a little more interesting. So what do we see here now? A little more vibrancy in the lights of these distant trees. And why I'm focusing on the distant brushes right now, I guess, is because it's something I kind of need to put in more so now before I start putting in branches of the trees. Need a little more chroma to it. So just where you see the light kissing all this stuff. There's some over here as well. It's this tree a little bit. Helps pop out that tree. As long as it doesn't pop it out too much, you should be good. All right, so back to the snow. This tree, well, sorry, I'll go back to this tree one last time, just because it's the darkest thing in here. And so it's a little bit too warm. And the reason I said it's a little bit too warm, because it looks like a bright sunny day, so that means it's a warm light. So generally the shadows will be cooler. All right, and I did miss this beautiful jog on this tree. I'm going to change that tree. I love that jog that's on this tree, so I'm going to add that in there. And it'll come up and we'll make a tree-like. Edges be damned. We don't have to worry about it too much. Soft edges are important, right? There's 4 types of edges as well. There's hard, firm, soft, and lost. So that's quite dark. We might have to adjust it for the final painting. Let's get into a little more of the snow here. Just mixing ultramarine and white. Not too much. We'll do a test. Way too dark. Isn't that interesting? My eye perceives it to be lighter than it is. That's why testing is always important. Why paint with something that's not appropriate? I'm just giving some of these a little darker aspect to it, especially just in different areas. Just because I didn't find there's enough contrast between the lights and the shadows here. There's a slighter darker value there. Beautiful thing about oils is you can semi-blend it, semi-mix it into the mix that you had before. There's a line here that kind of comes like this. Comes up. Across. I want some viridian mixture as well again. That's a little bit too light. Yeah, a little bit too light. And I see some shapes here that are interesting, so maybe I can get them in. You don't have to follow these shapes exactly. They're just there for interest or context, because once we get all the spriggly grasses in, it'll be all behind that. It'll lose context. Gotta get rid of that white there. Let's bring some of this lighter yellow. I'll kill it a little bit with some viridian mixture. And we see some here. And the reason I'm killing it is because although this is a light area, I don't want to have as much interest as over here. Because again, my focus is supposed to be kind of in this area here against this tree, so we'll see. And so even though this is lit over here, I just don't want to pull your eye away from the aspect over here. And then you'll see that a lot in photos. Like maybe it could be that this is the brightest part of the photo, but that isn't necessarily what you're going to paint. Always keep that in mind. It's all for the context of the painting. It isn't necessarily because it's there is what nature provided you. Nah, that doesn't make a good choice. We have another little strip there, some on top of there. We could add a little bit back here. We'll see how that works. Might have to adjust it. All right, so now we get a sense of light down here. So when we bring in the, kind of the darks of this brush here, I'll just put this in quickly. Oh, that gets lost, but when we get these darks in here, these lights really start to stand out a little more. All right, now there's something that we don't really see here is a little bit of red. I'm going to put a little kind of pinky tones in here. So also my CAD red that I hardly ever touch. Too dark. I got to make it really, really white. Because I see some of the reds kissing. Oh, you can see that's a little too dark already. So values. Especially when it comes to snow. You can easily start making it too dark. Here, got a little bit in here. It comes across there. And then these pinks really start to, or these really warm values of snow really start to bring everything a little bit more to life. I'm going to bring some in here. I used ultramarine blue and a transparent red oxide. You could also use burnt sienna. And I shifted it towards more the cool side. This is just a scraper. You can buy, I don't know, it's just a cheapo. I might got this at the dollar store, and you can replace the blades. They have smaller ones as well, about an inch wide, but it's just a metal scraper. It's on glass pallet, so it makes things quite easy. Whoops. Oh yeah, one of those viewfinders? Yeah, absolutely. I got so many of those things lying around. It's kind of funny. I got one or two in my bag. I got one or two in the studio. Yeah. So what I do is depending on the canvas I want to choose, I will adjust the viewfinder for it, and I'll just keep on looking until I see something that catches my eye. You can also use your fingers. Essential tool for any plein air artist. Oh yeah. As soon as I got the main block in done, I switched. And that's how I really started to paint some of the snow here. You can get some nice brush strokes on it. At this stage, yeah, because I want to see exactly where some of this lighting needs to go. As I get more progress farther and farther on this painting, I will look at it less and less. And I'll be making decisions solely on, for the sake of the painting. So these pinks are really wonderful. They really help bring out the yellow for the light, and also the blues. Some in there that'll cover up later. And I need to merge some of this stuff a little bit better. So I'm always thinking, always trying to decide what I need to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I did it more for your benefit, because I can see, I can see the pinks, I can see the viridians, I can see the blues all within this. But I want to emphasize that you can manipulate the photo to be able to see that kind of stuff. And so just viridian and white again in here, just because I see it. And all these different marks will make it more and more interesting in terms of the snow instead of just blue and white. I haven't stood back until just now, and there's a few things I don't like about the snow. In terms of the shape here, I think I want to bring that back more like that. And it's kind of a one stroke and leave it. If I fiddle with it, I'll mix those two together and I'll start getting chalky colors, right? Chalky colors is generally colors that don't have enough saturation or chroma in them. And muddy colors are generally colors that just aren't warm enough. So new mix, another stroke, kind of leave it. Yeah, I like how that is working there. Here, I'm just going to change it a little bit. And I'll take some of this red white that I had, put that in there as well. I need more paint. So sometimes I need extra paint. Synthetics are really great for putting paint on the paint, but sometimes you just need to push it and put a roll of paint on there. I don't know if you can see that very well. Probably not. But it allows you to all of a sudden put a nice stroke on, and it really stands out. And we have a little bit of red in there as well. All right, and I want to make this the focal point, so let's see if I can get there. I just want to make a mixture of this white and yellow. And I want to see if I can get a nice, clean cut right there. So the contrast there isn't working enough, which means I'm going to have to go in and, I don't give up on it right away. I will go in and modify this value back here a little bit darker. You know, even though I talked about perspective or aerial perspective and trying to keep things not as dark as the foreground tree, sometimes you just need to alter things a little bit because no one's really going to notice. As long as this dark doesn't get too dark. All right, and so I'm still not enough, so what I'm going to do is adjust the snow. Yeah, that's a nice value. Snow here. All right, so we're starting to get a little more contrast here, and I'll play with it. Heck, who knows, I might actually change the focal point. So we'll see what happens in the end. But that's kind of where my goal is right now. And then that kind of reminds me that I might have to subdue some of this a little bit. Is this pulling me up too much? I mean, there's some white lines and dots and stuff I got to fix and whatnot. Now, also, another way we could do that is to darken that tree a little bit. So go into our mixture that I had before for that tree. Pull in a little more ultra. Put a stroke in. All right, that's starting to get a little bit better. Because technically, as you look at this tree, this bends down. So it'll be a little bit darker. There will be reflected light into it, but not everyone will see that. And so it's just taking your liberties of, there you go, making that a little bit darker. All right. And that brings me to my attention to this tree. And geez, well, maybe that this tree ended up a little bit too dark. So what we're going to do about that is we'll adjust that value a little bit. And it's a real back and forth depending on what you want to do to the scene. Like some of these trees can be pop them a little bit more. And of course, we have to get this tree in here a little bit better. So even though they're blocked in, doesn't mean they're done. And I gotta do something with this tree to make it a little more interesting. Temperature shift. There we go. So it's starting to get a little bit better. We can start to see this area come to life a little bit better. When I step back, we're starting to come in. So it's a glass palette, and what I did is I mixed a 50% gray acrylic as close as I could, and then just painted the back of it and used that. Having said that, I work on a facade box that's wood, but I also have a Yugo facade box, and it uses a white piece of plastic, polystyrene. And oddly enough, I can actually mix my values better on white than I can on the mid-gray. So everyone's different. Some people can mix colors better on the gray, some can mix better on a white. It's kind of odd. So eventually, I think this might just change to 10% gray or 5% gray. White would be a little bit too stark. And I love glass because you can easily clean it. I have a cover for it. If you're working oil paint, great tip. If you have a palette, find a cover for your palette. And then what you can do is you can take find a soap making store or aromatherapy store and buy a big thing of clove leaf oil. All right. And then you can put a cotton ball saturated with clove leaf oil on there. And as soon as you put your lid on that, it'll keep your oil paints fresh, I don't know, 8 weeks at least. Like I've come back after summer plein air painting, and that's what, 8 weeks, 2 months. And my paint is just as fresh as the day I put it on. Nothing skinned over, nothing dried out. All right. I'm going to adjust that front tree again. Sometimes it gets mixed in there, knocking back this tree. It's still the darkest, but at least it doesn't pop out as much as it did before. I still have to go in and make some adjustments. And of course, trees have reflective light into them, so you can take some of this blue and mix it in as well. That's probably a little bit too light. So always think of reflective light, even on trees. You'd be surprised. So a little bit of reflective light on there. Maybe there's some reflective light down here to help really bring that to life. All right, but back to the snow. So we really have a mixture of sort of magentas and our yellows in there. Maybe we want to pop out, see if we can pop out some light a little bit more. So we add even more yellow, get that chroma up, get that warm, really, really warm. I don't want to put it over here because it'll take away from my focal point. So maybe I can put it in here, get that high chroma in there, and that's helping already. Go back to my not so saturated white. Because we have some lights here and there that I got to deal with. Only at the very beginning. What I'd use it for is for laying in my composition. I'd pull up to the scene. I'd see this tree's about, just above halfway up. I'd make a mark. I'd draw it, kind of put the tree in. I'd see where this peak is. And okay, here it's more in the middle, which is fine. And my tree is right in the middle. And I'd use it more for drawing than I'd use it for anything else. And as soon as I get the general sketch onto the board, it goes in the bag. It's just a compositional tool. A little bit of light back there, not much. We'll go to that Viridian as well. Put that in. Got a little bit too light with the Viridian. There we go. Nice. Maybe use some of this light up front again. See how this goes. There. There. It's just a general tool. What I want to do with it. And there as well. Kind of comes up here. Go for a darker blue, and this could be the really dark shadows of the snow. Keep the edges soft. When in doubt, keep the edges soft. Oh, it all depends on the season. In the winter, it could be 2 months. In the summer, if I come back at noon and throw it on the deck, by the end of the day, chances are it's touch dry. So it really depends on the season and how thick you paint it, of course. If you have a really nice thick dollop, in the sun, it's going to take a couple of days to really skin over to be acceptable. The winters are the worst, though. So we've got a little bit of ochres in the reflection of the water because we do have these trees back here. Start putting a little bit of ochre in there, and we'll see how that comes out. Here as well. So this is where it comes to, seeing what's in the reflections. And just by adding this ochre, it's starting to make it more interesting. We'll take some of this light blue, put some more white in it, and maybe I can get some sense of cool it snow over here. All right, and I haven't even touched the violet. I actually see a ton of violet over here. Oh, this is 18, 19, maybe 20 by 14. It's an odd size, just because I found it in the trash. It's probably from an entertainment center of some sort, so it's tempered glass. But if you want to buy standard sizes, you can, of course, always do that. But I usually look for the trash. Can't find them as much anymore. Yeah, so if you have a Caribbean Ocean or whatever like that, it's really that beautiful teal. You can go out and buy teal paint, of course, just mix a warm or cool based off that, just the values. But what I find, like the cerulean blue hue, Viridian, a little bit of Hansa yellow, medium, or even could be some other warm yellow. As soon as you start mixing that together, just a little bit of white, you get this beautiful rich green in there, and you can shift it. So if you want it warmer, in the inside of the wave or whatever, a little lighter, white always cool, so add a little more yellow, so you can get a beautiful green there. You can put more cerulean in here and get more of a coral. Cerulean blue hue, of course, is just phthalo, so you could use phthalo and viridian as well, depending on the temperature, right, and the depth. So you got this wide variety of being able to paint Caribbean water if you want to, and that's just by adding viridian to your palette. You could go out and buy some of those beautiful colors pre-mixed that you'll have and you use for one painting, or you can have a staple of colors that you can really much paint anything with. Yeah. Well, for background trees, I kind of scratched some stuff in, but you could add a little bit. But for these trees here, I'll use my rigger brush. I'll mix a darkish value, but not so dark because the light wraps around them. And I'll edit it. Like you see a lot of the brush, there's a ton of branches in the tree here. This tree has like a whole patch here, and I wouldn't really necessarily put all those in. But it's just a matter of going in with your rigger brush and thinking like a tree and deciding how many are enough. And then making sure that they cross other trees to get a sense of depth. Right? If all these trees just have branches coming off and they don't touch each other, it looks kind of weird. This one might have one coming this way. Sometimes there's just a tree nubbin. Like this one's missing quite a few. I'd have to decide how I want to do it. I got the shape of the tree indicates that I got something here. And now whether or not I bend it this way or that way. And I know there's no definite answer to this is how many I'd put in. I'd put it in as many as I think is enough. And in terms of these back ones here, we can do that a lighter ochre. And, I've scratched them in, but I could always go with a little darker ochre just to get a sense that, they're there. I don't really have to do much to them, because if you draw them all in, all of a sudden it starts taking away from your painting as it is. Right, so you can start just doing little things like that, coming down, bringing it over, bringing it up, making it a little bit darker, making it more violet, making it less violet, making it more ochre. And then I go in with the sky again too, right? Where's my sky color? I don't really have one. And I would potentially start adding a little bit of sky holes within these as well, just to get the sense of more interest and more depth within that. So this scene is quite complicated in terms of what needs to be finished. The snow is the easiest part, really, in the end. Everything else will be just beautiful context. And then, we've got these beautiful ochres here, and we can start, you'll see them. I'll use my rigger brush for these as well. What I have in there, especially when you have ones on the bank and they come across and over. Like as soon as you start putting all that stuff in, all this hard work you put in here in the snow will pay off because it's going to have depth and a sense of life to it after that. And I guess what I should probably do is zoom in a little better. You really start seeing the texture to it and how the sort of the warming pink, but this is cool compared to the yellow. So the yellow white is the warmest, and then you got your viridian, which is a little bit warmer than the blue, and you have another value here with pink, but it's not as much as this. And so you really get a sense of life and light and shadow in there. And of course, this nice dull paint there for the focal point. We'll see how that pans out.